Welcome to our October 20th North Middlesex Council meeting. We would call this meeting to order at this time. Roll call, everyone is present. Disclosure of pecuniary interest, please hand it in to the clerk if you have any. I have none at this time. Minutes of the previous meetings from October 6th. Any errors or omissions or business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, we are looking for a motion to pass those minutes. Moved by Councillor Keogh, seconded by Councillor Moyer. All in favor? Carried. At this time, just before we go into delegations, I'm going to pass it over to the clerk.
Thank you. I would just like to take a moment just to acknowledge a new member of the North Middlesex team, and this is Ashley Korchuk. So she has joined our team onboarding on October the 12th, and she is our deputy clerk. As Council is aware, my retirement will be next year, and so we've had a great opportunity to bring somebody in as a deputy to work together in a smooth transition. So I would again just like to welcome Ashley. She brings a young, fresh perspective to our organization. I look forward to learning from her, as I will be able to pass along some of my experiences and resources to her. And I look forward to the community getting to know her through the clerk's office as well as through council. And yeah, at this time, I'd like to welcome her to our team.
Welcome, Ashley. At this time, we will go to our first delegation, and it is Dylan's Consulting. And Jonathan, would you like to do the introduction?
Through your worship, I'm glad to introduce Patty Kennedy and Kelly Markle. They worked on a North Middlesex settlement area background study to help assist us in our official plan amendment. So we have a presentation to present to you tonight, and Dylan will start that off. So just bear with me. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Okay, take it away.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Both Kelly and I have a brief presentation to walk you through. It's going to be the highlights of the North Middlesex settlement area study. I'll just say next slide and we'll go to the next slide. So the presentation is going to cover a bit of background. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the impetus for the study, some of the policy drivers and things that underpin this kind of work. And then Kelly's going to walk you through the details of our land needs review and some of the key findings. And I believe Jonathan's going to outline a few next steps. Next slide. And we can jump to the next slide. So when undertaking a study of this nature, it's really about understanding what some of the growth opportunities are in North Middlesex, and also understanding what some of the constraints are. It's important to take a good close look at not just the opportunities that exist for potentially a settlement area extension, but also understanding how well your lands are positioned to accommodate your forecasted growth. Ultimately, this type of work does initially focus on some numbers and some questions of supply and demand. But there is quite a bit of flexibility at the end when you reach your conclusion. So we'll be very interested to hear from you at the end of our presentation, what you think of some of the key findings and conclusions. Ultimately, the study does focus on your three main settlement areas. These are the places where you have full municipal services and the places where you're expected to accommodate the largest amount of your future population and employment growth. And as Jonathan noted, this is a background study, so it is a study, it's a snapshot in time, and it's going to be used as a tool both by the county when they update their official plan, but also for yourselves as you update your own official plan. Next slide. Any study that looks at perhaps implications to settlement area boundaries or questions around growth, we do have to start with the provincial policy statement. It does provide some general guidance for municipalities around how they're intended to plan for growth. A couple of those things that they identify is the maximum timeline. The PPS states that you can do your land needs work on up to a maximum of 25 years. They also provide some minimums in terms of municipalities to be competitive. They need to maintain at least 15 years of supply for growth through the lands you designate in your official plan for residential development. They also provide guidance that you should have at least a 3-year supply of draft approvals and registered plans. And that finally, in doing this kind of work where you're looking at the supply and demand opportunities, the PPS does provide guidance for settlement area expansions. In the event that you don't have enough land to accommodate your future growth, then you can certainly look at options to expand a boundary in the settlement area. And generally, they say this should be done when you're updating your official plan, but there's little asterisks on our slide, and that the new provincial policy statement does provide a little more flexibility to look at that outside of your comprehensive review. It's a bit of a moot point because I do believe you'll be looking at this through your OP review at a later date. The next slide. So just a quick point on settlement area expansions and the framework that the province asks us to work under. They do provide some guidance to municipalities. I think you can appreciate that with thousands of settlement areas across the province, there are some basic rules. First one being that you do have to be able to demonstrate that you can't meet your projected demand with the lands you've already got designated. And that if that's the case, then you need to be able to also demonstrate that you can plan for the infrastructure, that you're dealing with the impacts on any agricultural lands, whether it's their agricultural capability or whether there's implications for what we call MDS, the livestock setbacks and sort of things. For the next slide. So this, again, I guess not to belabor the point, but this work here is a background study. It certainly will inform your OP, it will inform the county's OP, and the study is actually one of the drivers is the county asks that settlement capability study be required when contemplating any expansions, and certainly that's what this study is intended to satisfy that particular test in the county's OP. So as I said, it is very much a foundational piece of work, sort of a first step in looking at the future demand and potential supply constraints. Let's go to the next slide. And I will hand it over to Kelly, who's going to walk us through some of the detailed findings of the study.
Thanks so much, Patty. So as part of the study that we conducted, the first step was really to understand land needs through a land supply analysis. And through this work, what you need to do is take a look at your residential supply and then assess it against the residential demand to determine whether what you have in your development pipeline and the capacity within your vacant lands would yield a residential unit count that would meet the residential demand. And this is really a 4-step process, and the outcomes of this process would determine whether or not you could expand your settlement area boundaries. And so on the supply side, what we have to look at is the development pipeline and the vacant lands in settlement areas. And really this includes your draft approved plans, unbuilt units on registered plans, any in-process applications, and again, vacant land designated for residential development. And then on the demand side, what we look at is housing need for future growth from 2021 to 2046, which is that 25-year demand period. And the scenarios would be informed by the county's work, historic trends, and municipal servicing, among other factors. Once this work is done, if there's a shortage of residential land based on the projected demand, then you could justify settlement area expansion. However, if there is a sufficient supply of land within the settlement areas, then other options could be explored. For example, settlement area rationalization in order to address perhaps any mismatch in terms of the location of the supply and where the demand may be. So next slide. Thanks so much. Just for clarity purposes, very quickly, when we talk about the development pipeline, as I said, that really constitutes your draft approved plans, your unbuilt units on registered plans, and any in-process applications that have an established principle of land use, or where an applicant has come in for a pre-consultation with enough information such as a unit count perhaps to glean the development potential. When we talk about vacant land, what we mean are lands that are designated for residential development in accordance with the existing zoning that are in the settlement areas. And the settlement areas really, in the case of North Middlesex, are Elsa Craig, Park Hill, and Nairn. And the vacant land only includes the vacant land in those settlement areas. It excludes the land that we would have captured through the pipeline, and it excludes any conversions or requests for conversions. And we have netted out hazard lands and environmental features as part of the analysis. So next slide, please. On the residential demand side, what we did is we looked at the work prepared for the county as part of their OP review. And what that work found was that the county is experiencing greater development activity than when compared with historic trends. And they did identify that this demand is anticipated to shift toward a larger proportion of medium and high density housing forms compared to historic trends. As part of the work for the county, they did identify a number of different potential growth scenarios for each of the municipalities. And for North Middlesex, what they found was under a low scenario, we could expect up to 16 units to come online on an annual basis. On the further end, in the high scenario, you could anticipate up to 26 units on an annual basis. And what we're showing here is that, again, as I said, the county's work did provide a demand forecast under low, reference, and high scenarios. And for North Middlesex, what the county's projections indicated was that you could expect anywhere from 480 to 780 units over the 2016 to 2046 period. And so that constitutes our demand quantum in our analysis. Next slide. Thank you so much. We did take a look at historic residential demand in the municipality on the basis of building permits between 2005 to 2020. And we saw that there was a strong building permits issued between 2005 to 2010. The annual average for the 2005 to 2020 period was 26 units, which does track with what the county's analysis found. Your highest year was in 2008, and in more recent times, the development has been tapering off slightly. But all this to say, your building permit information does correlate and correspond to the analysis prepared by the county. Next slide. Great, thanks so much. In terms of the development pipeline, again, what we looked at were those applications either in process or received at some stage. And we found that there are 649 units in your development pipeline, and they are almost evenly distributed between Elsa Craig and Park Hill. And they're averaging at about 13 to 14 units per hectare of development, and primarily singles and semis are what we're seeing a lot of, and the towns and multiples are a bit slower to come on. Next slide. Thanks so much. In terms of the vacant potential, we looked at what vacant land was available in each of the settlement areas, and Elsa Craig has about 31 hectares available for residential development. Nairn has almost 23 hectares and Park Hill has 34. So in total, you have just shy of 89 hectares available of vacant land where residential units could be developed. Through our analysis, we applied a factor and determined that this yields a potential of 1,273 units that could come on. Next slide. So in terms of what the math looks like in the supply side, we know that there's the 649 units in the pipeline. We know you have potential for up to 1,237 units, which gives us our total supply number as 1,886 units. Next. This is just a kind of visual reference of where the land supply opportunities are in Elsa Craig. And what we're showing here in the purple is kind of the lay of the lands of the approvals that are in process or in some stage of development, but not yet online. And if we're looking at the balance, those are some opportunities for infill development in Elsa Craig. Next slide. Similarly, what we're showing here are your opportunities in Park Hill. Again, the yellow are showing infill opportunities, and we've identified where there are applications in certain stages of development. And in Nairn, we do know again here through our analysis in the development pipeline, there is no development in the pipeline, but there are 2 small infill lots and a number of large vacant parcels that could potentially yield residential units. Going back to our supply and demand analysis, we have our quantum of 818 units in the supply, and we know that the county is projecting anywhere between 480 and 780 units for North Middlesex. So the conclusion at this stage is that the residential supply is greater than the demand. What we did find though through our analysis, and it's important to note, is that the county's 3 scenarios may not fully capture the current market demand potential. We know there are large scale developments both in Park Hill and Elsa Craig, which may come online in the short term, but it's difficult in this type of analysis to ascertain when they may come online. And as a result, in the near term, the pace of sales and development for these areas are going to be an important thing to monitor for the market in North Middlesex moving forward. Taking this back into relation with the scenarios presented at the county level, that would be your 16 units per year, your 22 units per year, and your 26 units per year. In terms of years of supply based on our analysis, it does look like there is opportunity to accommodate supply for anywhere between 70 to 105 years. If for whatever reason development were to occur at a pace that is well beyond what we have seen historically in terms of your building permits from the 2005 to present analysis, you would have supply for anywhere between 25 to 35 years, but that would be a quantum of somewhere between 52 units every year and 72 units every year being built. Next. So just a quick summary of the key findings. What we did find is that there does appear to be a sufficient supply of designated land for residential development in the 3 main settlement areas. But again, as I noted, there are large developments in Park Hill and Elsa Craig, which could result in an increase in demand for residential development over time. And we do understand that there may be specific pressures to develop in Elsa Craig in the future, but there is limited land in that specific settlement area to do so. And on that basis, we do know, as Patty noted, there are some options that can be explored to enhance those opportunities for growth in Elsa Craig. Next slide. So within the context of the provincial policy statement, again, as Patty noted, municipalities can adjust boundaries of settlement areas outside of a comprehensive review process, subject to meeting certain criteria. And they are also able to adjust the settlement area boundaries through that process, which the municipality and the county are currently undergoing. What we did recommend in our report was further exploring opportunities to achieve this through a rationalization of settlement area boundaries, either through swapping land between those three settlement areas. So that would mean reducing the area of one of them and increasing the area of another, such that there is no net increase of urban area added to your supply. The other option would be to swap with the hamlets. So you could decrease your hamlet boundaries and add the equal amount to your existing settlement area boundaries, again, such that there's no net increase in the overall amount of urban residential land. Next. Oh, thank you. We did take a look at your 10 hamlets designated in the official plan, and they do provide 159 gross hectares of settlement area. So for context, while they're not your main settlement areas, the PPS does consider them settlement areas, though they're not the preferred areas for growth because typically they're not serviced. And there are other constraints with developing on those types. So the preference really is to target your growth to your settlement areas where services are. But we did notice that, oh, sorry, that there's about 60, just a little over 60 hectares in your hamlet supply that is constrained by hazard lands. And a lot, there's also some hamlets that are specifically constrained kind of to a high degree, and that would be really Sylvan and Hungry Hollow. So if you were to consider a land swap, those would be the two hamlets you might want to consider shrinking in order to address the settlement area needs. And again, as I said, there is this opportunity now to discuss this option, given that the county and the municipality are undergoing their official plan review process. And this could be implemented through those processes. This is just kind of a reference for Sylvan and Hungry Hollow, which, as I said, are significantly constrained. And what is shown here kind of in that light orange boundary is all of your environmental constraints. And I know it might be difficult to see on the slides, but there is a significant amount of hazard lands, both in Hungry Hollow and in Sylvan. Nope. And I think at this point, I will pass it on to Patty. Oh.
So
No.
that's the end of the presentation, but there are two recommendations before you open the table for questions, Patty and Kelly. And that council endorse the findings as presented by Dillon Consulting Limited per the North Middlesex Settlement Area Review final report as presented. And council directs staff to include this report as a background information towards the future undertaking of the Municipality of North Middlesex official plan update, which is scheduled to take place in the first quarter of 2022. Are there any questions?
Questions from council? Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. In terms of the maps that you've identified here at the last there with Hungry Hollow and Sylvan, when I'm looking at that, it appears that you have the two hamlets confused in that Hungry Hollow is on Townsend and Sylvan is on Elginfield Road. So I think they need to be flipped. Am I wrong?
That is correct. We'll make that correction.
Thank you.
Other questions? I'll have one. My question is on changing the designation from the hamlets to the, our other settlement areas. Does that need to be done when we do the official plan, or can it be done at any time without a major cost, major problem?
Through you, I guess I can answer that question. There is flexibility to do this outside your OP review when you don't change the total areas. Unless it's a pure land swap, the PPS does allow you to do that at any time. There'll still be some justification needed, but it can be done outside your standard official plan review.
Okay, so it's just if we're going to add, if we want to add property, that's when we have to do it on the official plan, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
Through your worship, and to complement Patty's explanation, this has been reviewed by Dirk at the county planning as well. And he's in favor of the suggestions. We need to identify that change to make it administrative in the future, and that would be the intention when we need to do it. Right now, we're just setting the table in order to being able to update our official plan.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Hemming?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Rob. Just a question for you. You're talking about swapping land, like in different hamlets and towns, but say there was no more, there's a shortage of residential land, say in Elsie Craig, for example. So, and people want to stay in Elsie Craig or be around Elsie Craig. Do you expropriate land or do you buy the land? Or am I?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can take a crack at that. Yeah, the reason to maybe do a land swap, as you saw from the supply demand, it appears just desktop analysis, there's lots of land. But as we know, sometimes people want to live in one settlement area over another. So you wouldn't have to expropriate or change ownership. You would have to change the boundaries of these of the maps in your official plan, effectively taking some development opportunity and rights out of the hamlets and transferring them to some new land in one of your settlement areas. And Kelly didn't touch on it, but the only reason you might contemplate that is if that you were feeling that getting a sense and some signals from the market that the amount of land that we've got and the demand we're getting allocated is maybe lower, not as well positioning ourselves for the growth that we anticipate. So does that answer the question, or?
Does that answer your question?
Well, yes and no, but what I'm getting at is he's saying that you change the boundaries, right? But when you change the boundaries to expand the area, do you not have to buy the land that you are?
Through your worship, no, we wouldn't buy, if we did the land swap or any expansion on our official plan or settlement boundary, it would just open up the lands neighboring to it to be rezoned as new development. So it would carry over either into our future development, which I think we're going to eliminate it through this official plan amendment. It would either be residential or commercial, and that would have to be presented for you as well as we move ahead. So we wouldn't buy it. It would be just the abutting landowners in Elsie Craig, Park Hill, or Nairn will now be included in the boundary area.
Okay, you got that? Other questions from council? I have a couple on the maps, if I can. One would be the Nairn map. And if you look just north of the Merritt property, that's not shown as part of the hamlet area, of the Nairn area. I thought that was part of the.
So Nairn is included in official boundaries as it is right now.
So I don't have the map in front of me here right now. But if you look straight north of Merritt on the to the west of Petty, that is again the same owners own that property. I thought that that property. Yes. Yeah, but it's directly north of Merritt. That's what I'm saying. Just looking at it on the map. It is Schlegel land, but it's on the north side of the Nairn community.
We'll look into that, and we'll make the
Because it's
correction.
not showing that as part of our boundaries. So I'm questioning that one. Does everybody know the property I'm talking about, just right at Bear Creek? Okay, so that one, and the other one was that his request is in Park Hill. We have to the north in that map, there's land there that would like to be inside the boundary, but it's not, correct?
Through your worship, we have lands to the east that have engaged, or west, my apologies, that have engaged us about opening it up. but this isn't the time and place for, this is the
But I'm
background.
saying
study.
they're not in the boundary.
They are not in the
Okay,
boundary
I
right
just want
now.
to get clarification on the maps. Thanks. But the Narren one, I would like clarification.
I'll look into that tomorrow.
Okay. Other questions from council? No other questions? We have a recommendation in front of us. Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor Moyer. In favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
So we do at this time have our second delegation is a presentation from WESSUC Incorporated, and it's about the Parkdale Lagoon Management. And Jonathan, are you going to do an intro on this?
So to council, WESSUC is here tonight. We brought this up, I think in other business, probably a month or so ago. Anyway, WESSUC is here, Phil and Melissa from WESSUC, to walk through a presentation. They've been working with municipal staff for a better part of a year now, I'm gonna say, and to get to this point where they could present to you at council tonight. So on that, I'll let Phil and Melissa take it away.
They've got it up there. Are you okay with up there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Is it okay to wear a mask or not wear a mask?
You'll probably understand us better.
So
without-
yeah, when we're moving around and we can't distance, we wear a mask, but if we can sit and be distanced, we can speak without masks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay?
Let us know if you can't hear us.
All right.
Thank you. And thank you, council members, for having us today. WESSUC is so very honored to be here today and propose a purchase of your Park Hill Lagoon location. Next slide, please. I am Melissa Demoda. I am the marketing manager with WESSUC, and this is Phil Cron. He is our director of business development at WESSUC. As you can see on your screen there, this is just a quick agenda for today. We're going to tell you a little bit about WESSUC and our background on our company. So because you may or may not have already heard of us. We'll talk a little bit about the project proposal and why we do what we do. Introduce a little bit of our services. We have a number of them, but we're only going to go through a few today. And then we'll talk a little bit about our lagoon maintenance cycle. And then of course, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So the background on WESSUC, we are a family owned and operated company. And I mean that literally. We have two brothers that own our company, and most of our employees are in fact family by blood or marriage, with the exception of Phil and myself, but we do certainly feel like family. Our focus is on beneficial reuse. We like to turn waste into value, and we work with a lot of municipalities and clients in doing so. We're not new at this. We handle over 370,000 cubic meters of materials a year, and 550 of that, 5,500 of that is spread to farmland. And that of course is free to our farmers, which is a win-win situation. In terms of our growth, we started as a two brothers, one back truck company in a basement office. And now we have multiple locations, including our head office in Brantford. We have an Angus location, which is up near Barrie. And we have operations in Sarnia as well. We have a great relationship with Sarnia. Next slide, please. I will let Phil talk about our proposal.
Okay, so project proposal. When we talk about a partnership that we want to build with the municipality of North Middlesex, it really comes from the core roots of who we are. Building partnerships over the last 20 years is what we've been very good at. Partnerships with municipalities, organizations, and industrial clients. We've been able to establish some very good rapport and communication with the municipality of North Middlesex already. But when we look at a partnership, it's about setting up a hub. So we want to set a hub up here in North Middlesex. By a hub, we mean move equipment in, have manpower here, employ locally. And that's really key for us. Build a land application operation. Seems simple to land apply biosolids, but we've seen over the last dozen years, many companies come in and not do a very good job. So we have our own NASM planning team. So we write up the NASM plans, we work with the farmers, we submit the NASM plans. We then have our own equipment to do the land application, and we make sure that we're in constant communication with the farmers. And again, it's at no cost to the farmers to land apply. The sorry, I'm just trying to read that, non-binding letter of intent. So that's what we're here to do today. 2 years ago, we met with the city of Sarnia, and we met with their staff, and we put together the letter of intent, and the letter of intent then went to the council for approval. We're doing things slightly different here. We're coming to the council for approval to start negotiations with the municipality to undertake a letter of intent. Job creations is big for us, not only in terms of who we can employ here in the community. In Sarnia, we've already employed 4, and we started there a year ago. But it's also the, sorry, am I pausing too much? But it's also the additional businesses that we can affect. We will talk later about odor and traffic control. If there's companies here that we can work with, we will employ them. Environmental specialists, we will employ them from the local communities, just like we did in Sarnia. Next slide, please. There you go. So the non-binding letter of intent, that's what we're here to request today. Once we have received the non-binding letter of intent, we then start our work. We need to know how much sludge is actually in the lagoons today. We have seen a report, it's a sonar report. I know the municipal staff here and the WESSUC staff are unsure if that report is entirely accurate. So we really want to do an in-depth dive into the lagoon to find out what's actually in there. That's the number one thing that we need to do. We also then need to start communication. And again, what we're doing is we're following what we did in Sarnia. So we need to start communication with Aqua, with the MECP, with local farmers, and all of the communication that we do will have the municipal staff of North Middlesex with us, either in person, copied on emails, virtually. We're getting very good at virtual presentations these days. So that's a big part of our due diligence that we need to go through. The fourth part then is to build that hub, to not only talk with the farmers, but also understand the additional businesses that we can do here. We have 8 different services. We'll talk about only 4 of them in a minute, but there's a lot of opportunity we feel for WESSUC here in Park Hill to develop like I said, a hub. And then the last part is to negotiate a purchase of the lagoons. Now, just go back to the first part for a minute. The non-binding letter of intent, when we sit down with the North Middlesex staff to put this together, it will come back to council for final approval. Okay, just like when we put together the purchase agreement will be brought forward from the staff to the council for approval. Next slide, please. The why. I always like talking about the why. Why are we doing this? We've been in business for 20 years. We now own 3 lagoons. There are 3 ways right now that you can service biosolids in Ontario fundamentally. The first one is land application, second is incineration, and the third is landfill. What we're trying to do is we're trying to really divert as much beneficial reuse organic biosolids from landfill. And in 2025, the provincial government has already said we don't want any more organics going into landfills. So there's an opportunity, we feel, for us to be able to service a lot of the municipalities across Ontario and set up a lagoon here, or sorry, set up, but purchase the lagoon here and potentially bring in biosolids from different parts of the region. Of course, it comes down to cost, transportation, and we look at generally about 150-kilometer radius from the point of location. But we also want to do it to improve soil. Putting biosolids into a landfill is a complete waste, and putting them into the incinerator is also, we feel, a complete waste. It goes against everything we believe. So diverting organics, reducing carbon footprint, reducing the gas emissions. But the big thing is the beneficial reuse for the farmer. And again, we do it for free. And the last one is, and we crunch numbers on this, job creation and free fertilizer to the farmer. So the way we do our math on this is we spread about 14,000 gallons on an acre. 14,000 gallons equals about 64 cube. We feel we can put in about 160,000 cube into the lagoons here, and that's yet to be proven, but again, we need to go through our due diligence. 160,000 cube divided by 64 is 2,500 acres that we can spread to around this area for free. Generally speaking, the cost for fertilizer is around $250 an acre, so that's 625,000. The balance is made up in job creation. That's how we get to the 900,000. I know someone was going to ask me that question, so I wanted to make sure I had the math done right. Next slide, please.
In terms of our services, as Phil had mentioned, we have 8 services, and even that is growing, but we're just going to choose to focus on the 4 today. VAC services is our bread and butter. We are proud of our VAC trucks. They are high pressure trucks and more powerful than some of our competitor trucks. The reason we like them is because they do the job in sometimes half the time. So they are really quick. If you require any sort of specs on our VAC trucks or tankers, we can provide those to you at a later date. Our residuals is another service we offer. We have a whole team dedicated to this. They handle everything from the analysis or sampling, even sampling from the lagoons, working with the labs, working with the farmers on their schedules, and actually the land application as well. So we have a whole team dedicated to that. Our team, Matt Jolly, who couldn't be with us today, leads that team, who is a farmer himself and comes from a family of farmers. So his connection with farmers is very passionate to his heart. Our clean out services. In terms of lagoons, our favorite clean out method is our lagoon crawler. The lagoon crawler is a rather interesting piece of machinery. It is a mobile unit and is remote controlled. So no one's actually in the crawler. It just goes into the lagoon itself. It's got very powerful mixers on the bottom, so it can actually mix up the sludge, even the hardened sludge that's been there for years, on the bottom of the lagoon, and then it sort of pumps it towards our hoses, which will get hauled away from the lagoons. Our sludge management and haulage services, this is where once the material, of course, is approved, we would haul the material from the lagoons and work with farmers on their schedules for land application. And typically our land application time is from April to November. Depends, we need dry land to apply, so that of course depends on rain dates and whatnot, but typically between April and November is a good time. Lagoon maintenance cycle. This is just a breakdown of the cycle of what it entails when we do a lagoon maintenance. We recommend maintenance because it is more cost efficient. It is also beneficial for us in terms of manpower and equipment availability. So as you can see there, we start with a sludge judge, and that is essentially 2 men in a canoe that goes out into the lagoon. They drop a sludge judge, is called. It's kind of like a giant straw into the lagoon. It takes up a sample of the sludge on the bottom. It also measures the depth at the same time. And that sample goes to a lab for analysis. And then once it's approved for land application, we come in, we do the clean out, we haul it off site, and then we go right to land application. The reason we like to talk about maintenance versus a one-time clean out is because a one-time clean out can be extremely expensive, both for you and for WESSUC. And if you do absolutely nothing with lagoons, sometimes they become an emergency situation where there is flooding or otherwise. And in terms of an emergency situation, you can be looking at astronomical costs and sometimes unavailability of machines or manpower. So a maintenance schedule allows municipalities that we work with to budget year by year what they want to spend with their management of the lagoons. And that way there's no surprises for them or us. It also allows us to schedule our manpower and machinery as needed. If you think of it in terms of a mortgage, is always a nice analogy I like to use. Of course, you could go out and buy a $500,000 house cash down one time, but oftentimes that is not the way we do. So we like to break things down by monthly and pay a mortgage, which we can work with our income and over time pay off the home. So, next slide, please.
So here's 2 interesting topics that we feel would come up today. Traffic control and odor control. When we look at both of these, we call our services a hedgehog. And when we look at our hedgehog, it's what are we good at and what do we do well? We do not know much about traffic control and we don't know much about odor control, although we're getting better at it. So what we would do is we would bring in third-party professional companies to map out traffic control, to look at odor control and give recommendations. And that would all be part of the purchase agreement. Traffic control for us is to ensure no tankers go through the town at all. Traffic control is that the trucks not going through the neighborhoods at 2 o'clock in the morning, waking people up. So again, traffic control is about the residents, and it's about making sure that the residents actually don't even know we're here. Odor control, there's about 1 meter of water, I want to say roughly, on the lagoon today. We've been there now a couple of times. There's no odor at all really there. Part of odor control is to mitigate the odor by making sure that you've got a good capping the water on top of the lagoon. Also planting evergreen trees. The front of the lagoon area is pretty open, so we would be putting evergreens in there. It does help to mitigate the odor issues. For us to say there would be no odor issues is simply not correct. So what we're also looking at right now, and we're investigating this for our Brantford Lagoon and our Sarnia Lagoon, is a piece of technology that is very sophisticated and can help to manage a lot of different odor complaints or managing the odor. And our environmental specialist, we've grown so quickly. We've employed an environmental specialist now that works for WESSUC. He couldn't make it here today, but he looks after the odor side of the business as well. So again, when it's not within our hedgehog, it's not something that we really focused on. We bring in third-party companies to provide us with the right information that we would then present to council in terms of odor control and traffic control. Next slide, please. I mentioned this at the start, building partnerships in our communities. That's what we're all about. 20 years of business. We can't survive in this world unless you build great partnerships. Partnerships are built on transparency, reliability, and trust. We've had the pleasure of working with the two Jonathans, and we've met with Rob once. The communication has been very good. And also, sorry, I'm not very good with names. I've met you once, I believe. Yes, sorry. But it's building partnerships, and it's being that solid partner that can come in, build a hub, bring in our equipment, service the community, provide free service to farmers, and at the end of the day, also look at some sort of a revenue stream for the North Middlesex community. We haven't dived into that, the revenue stream yet, but it will be part of our due diligence as we go through the process of the letter of intent and then going into the purchase agreement. So yes, building partnerships is critical for us, and we look forward to building our partnership with North Middlesex. Next slide, please. Why WESSUC? It's a saying that our owner loves to ask us all the time. Why do people want to deal with us? Why do they want to work with us? It's our professionalism, and it's the way that we operate. There's a quote here from Joe Booth. Joe works for the City of Sarnia, and I'm not going to butcher his nice words, but it's easy to read. One of the things that I would love to see in 2 years' time as I go in front of another council is we've got a nice quote from North Middlesex about the passion and the work that we do. So thank you so much for having us here today, and we're now looking forward to answering questions.
All right, questions. Who'd like to start? Councillor Keogh.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Thanks, Phil, for the presentation. With the successful purchase of the lagoons, if I understand this correctly, that would also be a holding lagoon for other municipalities? You would use it as storage, or is it just our waste alone?
We would be looking to import
Okay.
material from other municipalities, including NASM material. So food and beverage waste can go into the lagoons as well. That's the way that we would position it with the MECP.
Yes.
Make a change to the ECA. As I mentioned before, organics are being diverted from landfill. So there's an opportunity for us to work with local food and beverage producers. And when I say local, 150 kilometre radius, generally that's the sweet spot for transportation costs. Could come in here as well and be placed into the lagoon. It would be mixed in with the material and then land applied.
And that would be monitored by people of profession,
Yes.
just that they're not taking in any type of waste from any type of factory and it's just a dumping ground. It's monitored daily, weekly, monthly type thing.
Yes, we work very closely with OMAFRA.
Okay.
We work very closely with Aqua, and Aqua is probably our choice to manage the lagoons. They are a government organization, and like I said, we've already employed an environmental specialist as well. So everything that comes into our lagoons in Sarnia and Brantford today goes through our environmental specialist. We make sure that the analytical is updated, and then we go through the process of, does it meet all of the criteria for beneficial reuse? Does it fit into NASM OC1, 2, or 3? And if it fits into one of those 3, then yes, we can bring it in. So there's very strict requirements that we have to make sure we're not just bringing anything in.
Okay. Just one more question. Is this a 24-hour-a-day business that is open with trucks coming in throughout the night?
Right. Ideally, no.
Okay.
The exception would be that there's an emergency and material would have to come in. There would be generally an emergency. There's not a lot of time to react. But I would say 95% of the time that the standard operating procedures would be sort of 7 in the morning to 5 at night. Our lagoon in Sarnia is open 6 days a week. It's not open 24/7, it's 6 days a week. We operate there from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock at night. And on Saturday, it's 9 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Again, if there's an emergency, we will accommodate the emergency, but there would have to be a lot of dialogue going back and forth on that. So again, with the traffic control, the idea is to make sure that from an emergency standpoint, if it is coming in after hours, what route does the truck have to take to mitigate any sort of complaint at all?
Okay, thank you.
Next person, Councillor Hemming.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Rob. The finished product that when it comes out of the lagoon and before it gets spread to the fields, it has been approved by, like, who approves it, and has it been approved by the MOE to be deemed safe to be put on the land, contaminating streams or water table?
Yeah, we follow the Nutrient Management Act from 2002. So everything that comes into our lagoon has to be beneficial reuse before it goes out. So we can't bring anything in that can't go out.
Oh.
Okay, that's the rule that we follow. So to your point, when the material goes out, it's going out at about 8% solids. It's being pumped into our tankers. Our tankers are 45 cube or 45,000 litres. So that will help to also reduce the amount of transportation going back and forth. And again, to your point, there's nothing that will be going into the lagoon that can't go out.
Okay, good. And then also too, so is it injected into the land? It's not just dispersed on top and then worked in after, right?
Yes, we have a dragline system injection into the land. So basically, the way the equipment works is it opens up the land, material goes in, goes back on top. So that also helps to mitigate odors, but it also helps to provide really good nutrients for the soil coming from underneath. We've seen a lot of our competitors that will land apply on the top, and all you need is a good wind after it dries, and it also doesn't help to mitigate odors. So there's a lot of things that we've gone through in 20 years to make sure that we're doing it right.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Councillor Nicol.
You talk about emergencies, bringing it in an emergency. Can you explain to me what would classify as an emergency?
Certainly. We've had a lot of rain in the last couple of weeks. I know it's been all across Ontario. And we've had instances where, because of the amount of rain, the land application cannot take place in certain parts of the region based on the wetness of the land, and we're not allowed to under the Nutrient Management Act spread when it's raining because we can't control the flow and we need to be away from waterways. So we've had a couple of instances where we've had to move material in an emergency standpoint because the holding tanks that municipalities are dealing with are starting to get near the top. The companies that they've employed to do the land application not being able to do the land application, so now they're running out of storage space, and now they have to very quickly create storage space back, and so that becomes an emergency for them. Now, with that case, we were able to do it at 8 o'clock in the morning, pick it up from there, and move it to Sarnia. It was in Sarnia by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Not every emergency is going to be at 2 o'clock in the morning. We hope, but we do have an emergency line, and if it was to happen at 2 o'clock in the morning, we wouldn't be getting here until 6 or 7 in the morning anyway. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Other questions? Deputy Mayor Nelson?
Thank you, Mayor. Very interesting presentation. I enjoyed it as much this time as I did the first time. But I have a curiosity question, and you may not want to answer it. I don't know. But you indicated there'd be a revenue stream for the municipality.
Yes.
How do you make money? Who pays you?
Other municipalities.
Okay. Okay. All right. Good. Thank you.
And did I have a choice? I didn't have to answer that one.
Pardon me?
Did I have a choice? I didn't have to answer that one.
You didn't have to.
Other questions? I have a couple, I guess. One is when you're saying about purchasing the lagoons, there is some fear within the community from some people that privatizing the lagoons could be asking for trouble, you know. So my question is, and I think that's going to be a tough one, isn't it, with the ministry to be able to purchase the lagoons? My question to that is, a long-term lease, would that be another possibility if purchasing wasn't a possibility?
Short answer, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and that's why we would want to. That's why we would want to engage with the MECP right up front to get a good understanding as to how do we proceed. So that's why that was, I think, on part number 2 or 3 of our sort of plan with regards to after the letter of intent was agreed to, then we would be going to have discussions on those topics as well.
Okay. Okay. That's what I was wondering, because the purchase part of, I wouldn't want that just to be the stumbling block right off the hop. That's what I was getting.
Right.
So a question is, you talk about employing local people. How many people would actually be employed if the operation was up and running?
So once it's up and running, we feel within 5 years we could have 50 people employed here.
50 people?
50.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Another comment I want to make, I think everybody realizes that there's no piles of solid bio from this product, which we see is a problem in a few of our municipalities. And that I have had the privilege of seeing with John Lampman, your operation in Sarnia. And I did get to see some of this equipment that you're running. I have to say that the odor at that place was, we walked right around the edge of it. John and I were walking around the edge of it, and it was more like wet dirt. You know how you get in the Thetford bog and that kind of thing? That was the type of odor that it was at that time. So is Sarnia, are you now receiving other municipalities at Sarnia now?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yes. So would there be an opportunity for staff and maybe some council to go down and see that operation?
Oh, absolutely. We love to
Okay.
show it off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to, for people to see. Councillor McClinchy.
I see that you are servicing Kilworth, Kamoka, and Ilderton. How long has it been since you've been doing that?
Okay. Oh, is that I'm trying to think, is that the Middlesex contract?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
so we had that one for a while. I want to say like 3, 4, 5 years ago, maybe. We won this one earlier this year, and I think that's about a 2 or 3 year contract that we've secured with them as well.
so.
And that was through a tender process.
So they're happy with I take it they're happy with the service as well.
They love us.
We got that on YouTube, so we can check that.
Eric, please help me out.
Yes. Anything else,
No,
Councilor
thanks.
Plinchi?
No, I just.
Councilor Moyer?
Yeah, and I don't know, this might be for one of the Jonathans, with the situation we're in with our lagoons now and moving to this type of situation. How long would that take care of our situation or prolong needing a treatment plant or?
Through the mayor to council and board, depending on where this goes and what we can work out, if when we're under a letter of intent, ultimately the goal would be to run it self-sufficient. So our waste could go to the lagoons, could be land applied, possibly not have to build a plant, or be able to scale it down to some sort of fashion. We've had very preliminary discussions on technology that might be needed, but you can't speak to that there. We're not far enough through it. And to Wes's point, it doesn't make sense for them to get in and go and fully design this thing until we're into some sort of contractual agreement or intent with them. It'd be a lot of money outlay for nothing possible. But ultimately, it does extend our yeah, it is an alternative to a full-on wastewater treatment plant possible.
Through your worship, the other thing I'd like to identify through that conversation is that this is an opportunity to take an asset that we're going to have to take care of at one point or another and turn it, sorry, wrong term, a liability, and turn it into someone else's asset with cost recovery on that. Will there always be a need for a plant? At one point or another, the Ministry of Environment is going to come back and say either the plant has to go up or we have to deal with the sludge that's there. We're trying to get ahead of that conversation so that we can control the narrative. We tried to do that through the AMO delegation. We've tried to do that preliminarily. So this is today why WESSUC's here presenting. We feel like the missing component is council's endorsement to kind of proceed ahead. And we still have a heavy engagement process with the Ministry of Environment to get this even off its feet.
Deputy Mayor Cornelison, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just one final question for me, and I may have asked you this when we first met. How much of a challenge is it to establish commitments from local farmers to put this material on their land?
It's a great question. We've walked into new contracts where farmers are like, no, we don't want this anymore because there was no reliability on the service provider to really make sure that the material is being spread on a regular basis. And there was not a lot of communication. And in fact, some of the contracts that we've walked into and taken over has been because of such a poor dialogue between the farmer and the spreader. I mean, we can always say it's raining, so we can't do it. But there's a certain way that you can make sure that the material is being spread and you bring all your tractors and all your equipment in to make sure that you're moving the material at a fairly good rate. Like I said, we do 14,000 gallons per acre. So to your point, the challenge is to make sure the communication is right up front. I don't get to talk to the farmers. The farmers do not want to talk to me. They want to talk to our NASM planners and they want to talk to our land application people because they're the ones that know what the farmer's looking for, right? I could talk to the farmer about a tractor and a truck and he would know in 2 seconds. I know nothing about what I'm talking about. So at the end of the day, what we do is we make sure the right people are talking to the key individuals. Farmers are the most important aspect of this. So we would make sure that we had our NASM team here already and talking to the farmers. When we secured Sarnia, which was September 2020, we had our NASM planners out to local farmers within 2 weeks to make sure the dialogue had started and to make sure that we were ready to engage. Now, we'd already started dialogue with them, but as soon as the contract was signed, then we were able to now start to talk about spreading. So it's all about dialogue. It's all about communication. When we have a business development discussion within our team of WESSUC, we've got 111 employees. One thing that we're always being told is communication still needs to be worked on. And that's internally. but I think externally it's the key as well. So we need to be able to communicate very well with the farmer. We need to be able to work with them on their spreading requirements, crop rotation. And like I said, we also do the NASM planning for them. So we submit it on their behalf. The NASM plan is owned by the farmer, but we do all the work.
Okay, and you have then farmers in the Sarnia area that would support your proposals to local farmers here?
Well, there's the farmers that we work with in Sarnia. Yeah, we've got a good group there. Obviously, what we'd want to do if we were coming in here would be to work with local farmers here. Our ideal sweet spot is 20 kilometers. So 20 kilometers from where we are is where we would love to be able to spread most of the material. Now, of course, we can go further than that, but that's our sweet spot instead of our cost.
Great, thank you.
If I could expand on that just a little bit too, I think we have sort of the opposite problem where there's more demand than there is supply in terms of the farmers. Yeah, it's a good problem to have.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Councillor McClinchy?
I would be really, it would be very interesting to get a tour of this, you know, to know what more about it. Could that be set up?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Maybe we can do that. We'll do that through Jonathan and we'll set something up with, and you can work with you to make that happen.
Yeah,
That'd be
Phil
great.
said we love to show it off.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Other questions? No, we have a recommendation in front of us. And that is for, I haven't got it right in front of me too.
So through your worship.
Yes, please.
I believe a motion could be to the effect of that, sorry, pardon me, where did the motion go? That staff be directed to initiate negotiations with WESSUC to obtain a non-binding letter of intent for final approval by council. Is that?
Sound right?
Sounds right. Yes.
That's motion sounds right. Moved by Councillor McClinchy, seconded by Councillor Hemming. In favor? Carry. Thank you very much for your time.
We do have a few handouts. Is that okay to?
Yes,
Okay.
by all means.
We did get them before.
Well, you know what? Oh, you got it? Oh.
I've got one as well. Yep, yep.
I have one at home. I looked at it today.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we do have department reports. And it's from Brandon. You have the first one, I believe, advertising rates and fees.
So Mayor Ropp, members of council, as you know, last year we waived our rates and fees for advertising due to COVID. We didn't have a full hockey season. As we are starting to return to our new normal and hockey season does approach, is in full effect. I did want to go through the advertising rates and fees, and this report in front of you outlines a few new ones, as well as the advertising package that our co-op student Amber Tiller put together. So the only real differences compared to the previous rates is our in-ice logo was bumped $25 just because it's a very difficult one to apply for us. For staff, it takes significantly longer than say our board sign. It is a little bit more noticeable. It stands out more to a board sign because there aren't as many of them. So I felt the value was there a little bit more than a board sign. I've also added sport field signage. So for our ball fields and soccer fields, one thing we've never offered is a spot for people to advertise. I know if you go to many other municipalities, you'll see they have them in their outfield. And then there's just a few other ones such as the blue and red line sponsorship for there. We've had companies ask us about our dressing room board sign, if they could put their logo, like when you come into an arena and you see, oh, I'm in room 3, there's an advertising opportunity there where it could say Ford below so everyone sees that, as well as washroom signage, and then just a couple packages to kind of entice people to say get a board sign as well as a baseball sign, and you'll save a little bit of money by bundling. So that's the gist of the report, and the recommendation is that council receive the report entitled Advertising Rates and Fees Approval, and that we adopt the 2021 advertising rates and package as recommended. And this did come through the Recreation Committee as well. Thank you.
Questions from council? Deputy Mayor Canales.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Brandon, I think it's a great idea. And I'm not sure if I heard you correctly, now maybe I missed a part of your presentation, but when you're talking about the dressing rooms, did you say that you would offer an opportunity for businesses to sponsor a dressing room, like, and that would be called like the Coldstream Room or so?
So through Mayor Ropp to Deputy Mayor Cornelson, it's actually our physical TV when you come in that shows the dressing rooms. That's a great idea in the future to have that as an option as well, to have the rooms themselves. But this is more on our screen that everyone has to look at to play hockey. We can have a running ad for a company. It was actually McDonald Ford who asked about it, and they do that at the Strathroy Arena, and they were hoping that we offered that. There was no rate in the previous season when they wanted to do that, so that was one that I made note of and put in this package.
Great, thank you. A number of years ago, while at the annual conference, I actually attended a presentation where the municipalities and towns were encouraged to lease out their building, if you will, like the Scotia Center, right? And that the arena then could be called blah, blah, blah Center. Is that an option that we would consider or look at?
So yes, I definitely could look at what the going rate would be for naming rights of a facility. Typically, those facilities are on a 10-year lease, and it could be any, like the Park Hill Lions Center, if they wanted to. But yes, that could be looked at as well.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? I would have one. I was wondering, it came up a couple of years ago, I believe, the Zamboni or the Olympia, whether I don't see anything in there on that. Is that still an option?
So that is still an option, but the route we would head with that as a tender, what we found was there wasn't a whole lot of interest in the going rate. Lucan Arena, for instance, they've wrapped theirs, and I asked them their price. And then when I took that price back to some people, some companies who were interested, they said that's way too much. And trying to have, that's like, much like the naming rights of an arena, one that you want to put out there for everyone, not say first come, first serve at this rate, because there's only one. Right. And
Okay. No, I just wondered, so you've looked into that. That's all of us. Any other questions? We have a recommendation in front of us to approve the rates. Moved by Councillor Keogh, seconded by Councillor Moyer. In favor? Carried. Thanks, Brandon. Our next one is the report from the chief building official, and that's the third quarter building activity report. And we do have Arnie on the screen.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight just to present to you the third quarter building report for North Middlesex. It seems this quarter generally and this year generally reflects what we've seen over the last 2 years. We're meeting a lot of the typical numbers we would see over the last 2 years. We saw 15 new dwellings, and this year we're at about 11 with several in review right now. So it's another good year for dwellings. And the permit count typically would see about 175 permits. This report, we have 111, and we're at about 156 that are in review or submitted still. So I'm here to answer any questions, but no surprises is good news.
Oops, I'm sorry, questions from council? No questions? I like the reports a little different. It gives, I like the reports that's coming in. You get much more information on it. It's very self-explanatory. So thank you very much, Arnie.
You're welcome.
So there's no questions. We have a recommendation in front of us to approve. Councillor Nickel, Councillor Hemming, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, Arnie. Our next report is from the CAO with the COVID-19 vaccination administration policy.
Through your worship, members of council, the recommendation before you is that council approve the COVID-19 vaccine policy as attached, and that the COVID-19 vaccine administration policy comes into effect hereafter. Just quickly over the executive summary, as some direction from council to staff on September 15th, 2021. And since COVID-19 first emerged in the region at the beginning of 2020, the municipality of North Middlesex has maintained an ongoing commitment to take action to protect the health and safety of employees and residents. This has been a priority through every stage of COVID-19 response. As circumstances have evolved and information about the virus or the new emergence of the Delta variant have become more effective, ways of preventing the spread of COVID-19 has become clear in a vaccine policy. We are tabling and presenting to you today the COVID vaccination administrative policy in this regard. I also have Wayne Mahar here. He helped us vet this policy in reviewing other policies over the landscape of the municipal industry, including Middlesex County. We're taking the approach of a proof of vaccination or rapid testing. That being said, I'll open the floor for any questions for myself or Wayne.
Was there, just before we go to questions, was there anything Wayne wanted to add to this before we go to questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing to add unless there's specific questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, questions from council. Crickets. We had quite a conversation on this before and leading up to it and for the policy. And I guess instead of questions, that I would ask for comments on the policy. Now, this is just on staff at this time. We'll talk about council after this, but this is for staff at this time. But so comments on this policy that we have here, because I know there are some policies out there that are much more stringent. We know that some of our neighbors are more stringent and some are more lax. But any comments, questions? Councilor McLean.
Okay, for the ones that have been vaccinated, I guess there's no problem there, but the ones that's not vaccinated, they have to prove within a period of time that they're okay, and they have to be tested. And I did read it somewhere here, what they have to, in order to.
So if I can jump in, Your Worship. So with the rapid testing, one thing was clear through the discussion on September 15th was that would be paid for on the back of the employee. And that depending on your schedule, because everybody's different, you could at very minimum be twice a week or 3 times a week, depending on what service area you're in. But those are arrangements that would have to be made with HR and the supervisor. So we're trying to be flexible on both sides.
Okay, so, and then this person, they're still stable in their position, in their job? If they have to continue on, or is there?
So the intention is, although, and again, this was direct or suggestions as we went through the policy framework with our legal counsel, is that we do have to have something in the back of this, because you can't have a policy without enforcement. Our intention would be something similar to progressive discipline, where suspension would be first or leave of absence, and termination would be an absolute last resort. That's why we haven't really alluded to it too much through the policy, but it needs to be there as a backstop.
Okay, Councilor Moyer.
Yeah, I guess as far as subcontractors, I'm thinking if they're working on the fire hall or we have subcontractors in, how are we enforcing, or how are you checking on people in and out?
So again, every situation is unique. We can certainly put in the tender document, for example, the fire hall EMS, that is a requirement. However, when somebody comes on site for the contract or the general contractor, that is no longer our site. That is someone else's site. So it would be up to their care and control to ensure their policies are in place. If there is somebody entering a different facility, in terms of being able to manage them coming into the area, we would insist on them either meeting the vaccination policy or that they have been tested beforehand. And again, that's a part of the evolution of what's happened in the last 2-3 weeks from the province, that we feel that we have to offer both options to be fair.
So you'd ask it for the proof of vaccination, anybody entering facilities or.
That is correct. And we have been doing that unofficially now. Staff was sent an email about 2 weeks ago that this policy was coming. after our meeting on September 15th. And we use that kind of as a grace period to give everybody a heads up. And we've been able to get quite a few responses. There is some question about how to house this information that's still open for interpretation, but generally it's going straight to HR. We don't want too much private information held with a lot of people, but we're running straight to HR and holding that repository.
Other questions? Deputy Mayor Nelson and then Councillor.
I just have a general comment, Mr. Mayor Rupp, if I may, and that is, I think this policy is well, is due, and I think it's very accommodating for everyone. You know, it still leaves a bit of room for people to make their personal choices if they wish, but there has to be an outcome from that choice, if you will. So I support what the document. I think it's well done.
Councillor Hemming.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong. So if somebody, the only way that the other option to use the other option of the antigen of the rapid test is to, he has to have a medical exemption. And then he'll be allowed to have the rapid test.
Through your worship, medical exemption still has to have a test. It's just, we're not mandating the vaccine as recognized by a medical practitioner. So that there's still, you would have to be tested, and that's where a lot of the other policies are also trying to find that happy balance, I guess is the best way of looking at it. Wayne, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the interpretation.
Yeah, under North Middlesex's policy, if someone did not, it was not vaccinated, they still could get the antigen testing. It's not applicable only in the event of a medical exemption. That's an area North Middlesex had noted they just didn't want to go that far at this time.
Okay.
So if they didn't have a medical exemption and they choose to be unvaccinated, they can still take the rapid testing?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, yeah, then, yeah, good.
So one question I would have, we're saying 2 or 3 times a week, right? That's what it says in the policy, 2 or 3 times. 3 times seems a little over the top to me, but is that the norm on these policies, or why is it 2 and 3? 2 or 3?
So 2 is the minimum. And that's the recommendation that's coming from health units in terms of, and that's another quandary of the situation. Some of them recognize these rapid tests, some of them do not. But 2 seems to be the industry standard for the bare minimum, and 3 is when that transition onto the weekend shift needs to be flexed. And that's why we included it. The other thing I should note is that as this whole COVID situation shifts and changes, we will have to regularly revisit this policy and possibly the subsequent policy that will be put on council as well. So this is not something that's going to just sit on a shelf. We're going to have to revisit this probably at least once or twice.
Okay, Councillor McClinchie.
So you're talking about the rapid testing 2 or 3 times a week. What's the time period of getting the results back at the testing?
As far as I understand right now is about 20 minutes to half hour.
Oh, really? So it's not like a couple days or anything?
No, well, there are different providers out there that provide different services. Some are directly related to airlines. Some are directly related to people in the healthcare industry. But the additive test that we're going for is about a 20-minute to half an hour. For some occasions, it goes up to 40 minutes. And that's why they're rapid, I guess.
So where is this coming from, the health unit or one?
Just in review of the policies that others have implemented, hearing from some industry, there are some tests out there that can tell us that they're going to be 20 minutes, but again, we want to have the flexibility of this application.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Just for council, then I'll come to you, Andy. We're not going to be doing the tests ourselves. We're not doing the tests.
That's correct. We're not doing the test. That was clear through the September 15th discussion.
Yes. And so is there local, can we get the test local? I don't want to see people having to go to Strathroy or London, or can they get the test at, the Parkville Pharmacy or Ells Creek Pharmacy, or,
Not specifically do I know, but I do know that they're available. They're available in clusters of purchase. the question that we're asking ourselves if we're gearing up for this policy is if the employer provides the test, there's some liability towards that. The other issue we have is dependency on that test. I can't predict what'll happen if everybody's going to go out and grab these tests all of a sudden, if we're going to be able to get a steady stream of them coming into the office. So that's why we're putting it on the employer. We will certainly work with them to hopefully maybe help them out, but we don't want the dependency.
And you and I have talked about this. I just wanted to go in front of council like that, you know, how the tests will be done, and there's a little bit of unknown here yet on whether it be done. And now there is a time gap here before it becomes necessary. But Councillor Hemming, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so again, as we discussed in September there, the test would be at the staff own dollar, right?
That's correct.
Their own dime. Okay. And, okay, yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Okay, Deputy Mayor.
I just have one final question, if I may, and that is, in the event that some people, of course, are not supportive of the vaccine policy, but if there's an option, can they work remotely?
Through your worship, anything's an option, but putting it in a policy binds us to that scenario. Not every staff member has the flexibility of working remotely.
Right.
And we want to be able to be nimble enough to do it case by case, but also have the backbone of having a vaccination policy in place.
Okay.
So I would expect that's what will evolve into this conversation afterwards, is how does it apply to me? Can it apply to me in such said fashion? And what will the employer-employee relationship be thereafter?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions, comments on this policy? Seeing none, we have a recommendation in front of us. What's council's choice? Are you moving the recommendation? Moved by Deputy Mayor Ellison, seconded by Councillor Keogh. In favor? Opposed? One opposed. Okay, it's carried. Okay, now off of this conversation, I would like to bring forward, the council was not included in that policy because that, you know, for staff to write it for council isn't right. So council is going to have to make a decision here on whether to have a separate policy for council that mimics that policy, or what's the wish of council? I mean, we have to lead by example. I don't see that we don't have a policy. I'm a firm believer of that whatever we come up with. So comments or on it. Councillor Moyer.
Yeah, council should mimic the staff's policy, I believe.
Adopt the same policy? Adopt the same policy and put it to council, or put it towards council as well? Other.
Well, it's just, you can't just point the fingers at the staff and anybody that comes in to do any work for the municipality. So, I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. Like that's why we're bringing this forward. But then it brings questions. All right. So we have the same policy here. And as you said, Jonathan, each thing has to be looked at individually as to what it's done. So the policy is the same. If you're looking for the same policy for council, that's what I'd like to hear from council. Councillor Hemming.
So in council's position, I know you're trying to keep them the same, but they're not, right? Would you have the choice of zooming in to the meeting?
Who'd like to weigh in on that? You're talking about a counselor. If a counselor isn't vaccinated, can they join council on Zoom, correct?
Exactly.
Councillor Hemming, that's what you're asking? Jonathan, were you going to speak on that?
I was, through your worship, to council, again, everything is unique. We have to be cognizant of this space in terms of governance and allowing the general public in as well. Committees, we opted not to go down that rabbit hole because if they get intertwined, it gets rather difficult. So all I would ask is that if council wants to mimic something similar, that we maintain the flexibility that we've shown so far in that application to be presented to you in future.
Okay, so it is two separate. I mean, if we adopt this for council as well, then the question comes up, which we can deal with afterwards if you like. about your comments, Councilor Hemming. I don't know how council feels about that, but right now we're talking about the policy. And then from that, I think that is a council decision, what you're asking. I think it should be all of council decides that about the Zoom possibility and that type of. But first, I think let's look for a motion to adopt this
Could I have
policy for
a
council.
question?
Oh, yes,
first?
go ahead.
I know it's, okay, for the county councilors, do they have a policy in place?
County does not have a policy in place.
No. Did,
Correct,
Why?
Wayne? Wayne, would you like to comment on that?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. There's not one in effect at the county level at the moment.
Now, there is in the long-term care facility, of course, because that's been mandated.
That's mandatory from the province, correct?
yeah, but, okay, so we, the municipality of North Middlesex are pushing this through, but then the county, Middlesex County doesn't have a policy?
That doesn't mean they won't have a
Well, I
policy.
know,
They
but
don't have a policy.
They haven't been,
Correct.
they all know about it.
Yep. And many of the municipalities within Middlesex have already got that policy. Councillor Nickel.
Do we fall under the guidelines of the provincial government when it comes to COVID policies?
Through your worship, we do. You can go back as something as simple as the masking bylaw. Those are provisions related to PPE, social distancing, capacity restraints within common areas. If you're going further down the discussion in terms of, again, I'll use the example of the council chambers. What was AMO had clearly asked the province the interpretation of what council chambers is. It is considering a work environment. I can't remember the exact terminology. A workspace, which doesn't require the policy. One of the biggest issues with this policy framework and even our discussion is that the province was doing a lot of discussions before they released a regulation that impacted facilities, making it appear that it was going to be much more stringent. And then the policy was released in terms of allowing certain patrons, certain volunteers, certain coaches not to be vaccinated or do proof of vaccination. And then we also have Dr. Mackey's order that just recently came out that affects everybody 12 and up. OHMA has their own policies on the background. So there's a lot of stuff out there. I guess that's the best way of looking at it. But it's a fast and hard time to keep up with the policy. And that's where I go back to, we are going to have to revisit this on a somewhat annual basis. And I wouldn't be surprised that would be something that we consider in the first couple of months next year, or even before that, before Christmas, as the flu season comes on to effect. But that's all I really can suggest, is that we are in conformity. We're also taking the suggestions from the local Middlesex London Health Unit seriously. They did come out and say this is a mandate that every employer should be considering in implementing. So I hope that answers your question.
I do have a question for clarification. So with the policy that council's having potentially drafted for council members, also, is that including committee members that sits on council appointed committees? What category would they be falling under?
Wayne, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it would almost have to be the same policies, because they're well, not only in a workspace, but they're a committee of council. So they're not employees as properly defined.
Yeah, and that's correct, Jonathan.
Okay. Other questions? No other questions? To what you brought up, Councillor Hemming, maybe if you want to discuss that tonight, maybe under other business would be good for that. When you asked about that, rather, because right now we're working on the policy. Is there anything else on this policy? So we need a motion to adopt this policy for council members as well. Go ahead.
So again, I just want to get clarification. Are we going to create a draft, a similar policy to bring back to council for there?
Correct.
So it's not
Correct.
adopting this policy.
No.
You're directing staff to prepare
a policy.
So that will affect council and committee members.
Through your worship, we do have a recommendation before us for the policy affecting the organization.
Yes.
That could be passed tonight, and then you could give us direction to create a policy affecting council and committees.
make the motion to adopt that policy.
Yes, that's correct. We have that part of it. This is the second
Yes.
component of it.
So this is, the proper motion would be for staff to bring a policy
Yeah,
back.
so that staff be directed to draft a similar policy for council consideration affecting councilors and committee members.
Okay. Okay. Moved by Counselor Moyer. Second by Counselor Keel. In favor? Opposed? One opposed. It's carried. Okay, passing of accounts.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So the report in front of you covers the period of October 1st, 2021 to October 15th, 2021. And the recommendation from staff is that council receive and approve the following bills and accounts for payment in the amount of $1,232,553.35.
Questions from council? Deputy Mayor Canales.
Actually, my question was for Jonathan Latner, but I don't think he's here. Jonathan, can you answer the question on the filter sand by Water Tech? What would that be for?
That's through your worship. That's the Elsie Craig Pollution Control Plant sand filter.
Okay.
So it had to go through regular maintenance that we haven't done since commissioning. And that's what the invoice is for.
You say since commissioning, so it's been several years?
They have a good lifespan, but we need to get in there once in a while, grease everything up, check, clean it out, so on.
Yeah, I just never saw it before, so I asked. Thank you.
Counselor Moyer and then Counselor McClinch.
Through your worship, but I believe we only had one chainsaw in circulation amongst our staff, or two, so we bought an extra one. I can look in, I can pull it up right now for you. Is that the go? You might know better than I do. Is that the going rate for them now, or?
Speaking to an arborist, just the other day, he told me that about 1,900, 1,700 in one talk. So with everything that's gone up.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Counselor McClinchy, you had a question?
Just a question of curiosity. Daybell Pest Control, there's about 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 invoices. What kind of pests are we talking about here? What are they doing? Like, what's happening? Is it in this building or where is it? Like,
Through your worship, it's for multiple facilities within the
and
municipality.
when you're talking about pest, what is the pest?
Oh, it's just the little
Ice?
rodents. Yep. Yep.
Snakes.
Well, I just thought maybe it might have been this new building. I just out of curiosity.
Okay. Any other questions? I have a question on, and it was the tree cutting stuff brought it to mind to me. Do we have any way of tracking, like when we had that storm with the twister that went through, the cost to the municipality for that type of thing? Also, then we had the flooding 2 weeks later, I think it was. Do we have any, do we keep track of that? Like what the cost would be?
Through your worship, this clustering of invoice, first of all, was an emergency reaction. So it was getting everybody where we could in the situation. Alternatively, they are treated as contracted services. We could go out for tender to secure a bid, but we'd have to guarantee a certain amount. But in terms of tracking, each invoice is slightly different. I looked into them a little bit. Some are per tree, some of them are hour services. So we can definitely kind of refine that with our third-party contractors to give you a better idea.
And I'm not really questioning what they're charging us or anything. It's just, what was the cost of that event to the municipality? Approximately. That's more, it's not really, questioning how people are, the bill that they're giving. It's just, what was our cost? Is that a reasonable thing to ask for? I mean, it's just,
It certainly is something that I can tally up for you and bring it to your attention. But yeah, I can do the calculation. for sure.
that'd be great, I think, because we had a couple of pretty significant events that came through our community within a very short time, and I'd be curious what it cost us.
Certainly.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on our invoices? No other questions? Need a motion to pay our bills. Councilor McClinchy? Councilor Keel, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Estelle. Committee reports, Lake Huron, pipeline, ABCA, anything?
Yes, we had our preliminary budget discussion last week. We'll ask for a report to be coming back tomorrow. Actually, there is some good news for North Middlesex in that the budget as presented, our general levy was an increase of 0.4%, and the overall increase for North Middlesex was 2.6%, but our apportionment portion has declined for the first time, I think, as long as I've been there.
Yep.
You know, but some of the other municipalities has increased. So the average increase was 3.96% across the board. But with our apportionment declining, we're down to 2.6%. We did ask that they come back to the board with to review some of their projects and to see if they could reduce that increase somewhat. The other thing that I found interesting is that the changes in the Conservation Act has been delayed again, and they'll now take effect on January 2024. Okay, and one more thing, and I know Mayor Rob, you and I had talked about the lack of educational services, if you will, in North Middlesex by the Salva Bayfield. And I guess one of the reasons for that is that the Thames Valley School Board does not contribute to that cost. So that's one of the reasons why there's a limited number of education opportunities in our schools.
So do you know, do the other school boards
Yes,
that they're involved with, they do contribute?
I asked the question, they said yes.
Well, maybe that's one that we could ask the local school advisory could bring up and see if they can get an answer to that with the trustees.
Yeah, and that's so that's highlighted. We do have a meeting tomorrow, and the budget will be hopefully brought back.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Adrian on that? No. Blue Water.
Tomorrow night, they're gonna have a Zoom meeting. I'm going to be with the school board meeting tomorrow night, so I can, if anybody was interested in filling in my spot to see what's going on, because it's gonna be at 7 o'clock as well. So I'm gonna be here and I can't be at two meetings unless I watch Zoom, but no.
Okay. No, I understand.
So I don't know if anybody wants to, I can forward this email to them, maybe, whatever.
So I have a question. Can we put a designate in there? Like what is that policy? Are we allowed?
Through your worship, it would all depend on the terms of reference.
That's what I'm just wondering. I'm not sure if like in terms of reference. Well, you can't be in two places, so, okay. All right. Maybe we can check that if there's somebody who would be willing to.
And as you know, Mayor Ropp, I'm also on that committee, but I will not be attending.
Yes.
I have a commitment to the Housing Authority.
Okay, thank you. EDAC, nothing there right now. Local school advisory.
Yeah, so we have a meeting tomorrow night, but I would like to draw everybody's attention to the Rural Education Task Force on November 25th, and it's at the Park Hill Community Center. I think it's imperative that we get as many people from the community there as we possibly can, to make sure that we find out what's going on and how we can help the situation in our area with the schools.
Okay, the clerk has something she can add to that.
So thank you, Mayor Rob. So just further to Councillor Nichols' comments on that meeting. So it is a Thames Valley sanctioned meeting. Thames Valley will be doing the communication and how registration will occur for that. I think originally they were thinking that they would only be able to have an attendance of 25, but due to the recent changes in the capacity limits, that has up now. So yeah, once again, you encourage as much participation as possible. And I believe the purpose of the meeting is to review some of the feedback they've had from the Rural Task Force, different surveys and different documentation out there, and the ability for the public to ask questions and see what the next steps are.
Okay. Any questions on that one? Okay.
Yeah, so that will be coming through Thames Valley, but North Middlesex will partner as far as communication goes to put that out to everyone.
Okay, thank you. Recreation Committee? No, I think you've reviewed those policies that Brandon brought forward to us, correct? Policy Review Committee, nothing on that right now. Fire Committee? Okay. Aqua? Okay. So correspondence, notice of public meeting for planning for Lambton Shores. Receive and file. 2 notices of public meeting planning Adelaide Metcalf. Receive and file. County of Middlesex Office of the Warden Charity Golf Tournament. Receive and file. Did everybody see that there was $24,000 raised? $4,000 went to victim services and $20,000 went to the Lucan Legion. So that was a good deal. And the Royal Canadian Legion Ontario Command. Receive and file. Nothing on that? Nothing? Okay, so we do have a recommendation on that. And that is that council approve the quarter-page colored advertisement in the military service recognition book in the amount of $570.
So all I would add is that recommendation has just been drafted as council has in the past considered that advertisement. However, and it is each year council's decision.
Councillor Keel, you make that motion? Councillor McGlinchey, second. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Solicitor General, Community Safety and Wellbeing Plans. Anything on that? Nothing? Okay, other business, CAO cannabis operations.
Through your worship, members of the council, the draft bylaw that you have before you is for consideration as it relates to cannabis in as many uses as I could possibly throw at it, including medical at various streams of licensing. You also have some background information in form of a green paper from the County of Middlesex, from the planning department, and I'm sure it was vetted with legal in consideration as well, kind of giving a landscape overview. Generally, the intention of the bylaw that's been presented before you today is to impose or to regulate any cannabis production use, cultivation or production going through the site plan control policy. So this would include all measures related to federal licensing, whether they be medical or not, including greenhouses that would just be for-profit scenarios. With that being said, I'll open the floor to any questions.
Questions from council?
Oh, and I should also mention that the bylaw or the endorsement of the bylaw will be considered at the passings.
Yeah. Any questions on that? Councillor Moyer?
Just to comment, I had one that I had forwarded to Jonathan, and he's looking into that further, and that was just about the operator and the ownership of the property being combined as one.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on or comments? Okay, well, we'll see that in the bylaw going forward. 9/2, that was November 30th at 5:30, the Civic Ring for recognition. So go ahead if you want to. All right. So next meeting, we are giving out the first Civic Youth Rings, Achievement Rings, and they are through the school. And so there's 3 young ladies who are going to receive those, and we'd like to do that at 5:30. If everybody could be early, next one. And if you can be here at a quarter after, great. All right, so we'll have that. And I think we have quarter revisions as well on that one at 5:45. So it'll be an early meeting. Deputy Mayor.
Will you be sending an invitation for us to be here by quarter after 5 or so, 5:30? Okay, thank you. It's just that I'll forget. I
Just
know I
so
will.
that nobody forgets.
I'll forget.
Okay. All right, yeah, so this will be the first 3 rings that are given out, so. All right, any other business? You want to bring that up right now, Councillor Heminger, or do you want to wait? Okay, okay. Any other business? No other business? All right. Deferred items are in front of you, communication including county council.
Mayor Rupp, I'm looking at my notes here and I didn't note anything of significance to report, unless you have something. I have nothing.
No, I really don't. There's I think I did mention on the Blacks Bridge that's out, the EA is completed, it's out posted right now. So that's where it's got to go through that time period of posting. Not yet. Yes. Yeah, it has to be out in public domain. I'll find out for sure. I'm sorry. I'll find out and I'll let, it should be on their website. But I'm not sure where. I haven't looked for it myself. Sorry. And so we'll let council all know on that. Reading of the bylaws.
The bylaws are listed on the agenda. Bylaw 84 is the appointment of our Deputy Clerk Communications Coordinator. Bylaw 85 is the cannabis bylaw. And bylaw 86 is the confirming bylaw. We are looking for first and second reading of all.
Councillor McClinchy, Councillor Moyer, all in favor? Carried.
And third and final.
Councillor Hemming, Councillor Nickel, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. We need a motion to go into closed.
Mayor Rob, if you can just, or I can just advise that we're going to, for the closed meeting, live stream will be stopped for that portion of the meeting. Once that closed meeting has concluded, council will come back into open meeting, live streaming will continue. And if there are any recommendations as a result of closed meeting, they will be noted in the open portion.
Need a motion to go into closed? Councillor Nickel,